Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to another Tabletopics with Bill. Today, I'm going to be breaking down the failure of falling damage in D&D.
I know more than you.
Okay, so before you jump into thinking that I'm going to criticize 5th edition's application of falling damage, let me just say that Bob, the world builder, made a really good video about falling damage, and he explained also some historical context, which is that even going back to advanced Dungeons and Dragons, falling damage has always been 1d6 per 10 feet that you've fallen. Now, the difference between AD&D and 5e is that 5e put a cap on the amount of damage after a certain distance. So, what is this video about? I don't think that falling damage is realistic. And I know you're going to say, well, Bill, hit points are an abstract concept anyway. But just rewind the clock to 1986. I was a kid, and me and my friends used to enjoy climbing up things and then jumping off of them. Now, if you've ever climbed a tree and then jumped out of that tree, you're probably dropping maybe 10 feet, 12 feet. If you've ever climbed a garage and jumped off a garage, about the same thing. And most of the time you wouldn't hurt yourself. Maybe you roll your ankle, but you walk it off. Or you sustain a small fracture, and then decades later when you're an old man, it really hurts to walk around sometimes. But, you know, the reality is that if you fall like 20, 30 feet, it's going to hurt. If you fall 50 feet, it's going to really hurt. And there's some science, again, I'm quoting Bob the World Builder's video. He found something that said that like the average fall that a person can take before they die, like the point of lethality or something like that, was like 50 feet. And I know there's crazy stories about, you know, people going skydiving and their parachute's not opening and they fall from X amount of feet and somehow bounce and survive. I get it, there will be anomalies. But I'm saying, broadly speaking, if you jump off a cliff, you're probably going to die. I want my falling damage to be more realistic. And even in an abstract game environment, realism can happen. Now, the tender balance in game design comes with making things smooth and streamlined and not necessarily crunchy. And if you're not familiar with what the term crunchy means, it's basically when you get really heavy mechanics and a lot of math, and a lot of early role-playing games tended to lean into the crunch because they were made by wargamers, and wargamers wanted to replicate reality and realism as much as possible. So they made up math and rules to make that happen. So what I have come up with is a fix for falling damage. And I don't think that it's rocket science. It's very easy, very basic to follow. But I think it definitely adds some realism to what would happen as you fall from higher heights, because science and physics. So let's take a look at my handy fix for falling damage. Okay, so in this system that I've come up with, what I'm doing is essentially trying out what it would be like to scale the damage as a person falls from greater distances. The easy fix with a game like D&D is to incrementally increase the die. So I'm sticking with 1d6 per 10 feet for the first two chunks of damage. For 10 to 20 feet, it's 1d6 per 10 feet, right? So if a character falls 20 feet, they roll 2d6, and that's their falling damage. Now, from 20 to 40 feet, that's 1d8 per 10 feet. And from 40 to 60, 1d10 per 10 feet. From 60 to 80, I think that's the cutoff. That's where it becomes a bit more rough. And that's why I made it 2d12 per 10 feet. For every 10 feet after 80, 3d20. Now that seems like a lot, but maybe it should be. If you know anyone who's ever fallen 80 feet or more and survived, congratulations. But I think most people who fall 80 feet or more tend to be dead. How does this math actually work? Let's say that a person is going to fall 100 feet. Now what I'm going to show you is what D&D's current system would do. And I did this on a dice roller, it's randomized, but I'm showing you a few samples here of what would happen if you fell 100 feet. So that's 10 of the D6s. And you could see that on average, those numbers are pretty close. And that would certainly be enough falling damage if you were to fall 100 feet to kill an NPC commoner. It would probably be enough damage to kill someone who's under 3rd level. But any adventurer who's 4th level or higher has a decent fighting chance of surviving a 100-foot fall with the current D&D mechanics. And I just don't think that's believable. Especially in a game where you have character levels up to level 20. So, if a 5th level character could fall 100 feet and still survive, with no spells, no enhancement, no damage reduction, that still seems kind of crazy to me. Now, by contrast, let's look at my system, where as they're falling from greater heights, they're taking incrementally greater dice in damage. And you'll notice something, and again, no cheating here, these were random dice rollers, but you'll notice that with my system at 100 feet, you're taking significantly more damage. Significantly more damage. Was it coincidental that both of the total damages in these 2 dice rolls added up to 123? Yes, it was coincidental. And I don't know what the odds are of that, but it's pretty cool to me that I did a random dice roller on Google and they both added up to the same amount. But the point is that it's pretty significant going from damage that are maybe in the 30s to damage that are clear over 100 because math and physics and acceleration. Ultimately, what's the use of this fix for falling damage in your games? Well, consequences. Now, if you think that playing a role-playing game means that the players really never face any deep challenges or really never have to worry about consequences for jumping off of a cliff while they're exploring some location, then I think you're missing something from the gaming experience. Because the potential for death in just exploration, no monsters, just imagine that, the group is ascending a mountain, for example, and fail a critical athletics check for climbing, and they fall a great distance. Isn't it important to have that consequence? Isn't part of what historical explorers, when they were doing such things, that consequence was a real thing, the risk. I'm not a mountain climber, but ask yourself this: why do people travel all over the world to these remote locations to climb mountains? Why do mountain climbers climb? They climb because many other people won't face that risk. They climb because the fear of death, the consequence for failure, is an enormous risk. And they climb for the thrill of achieving that pinnacle where they've made it. They've climbed to the top. They've survived this challenge. And when we talk about creating non-combat challenges in D&D, if, for example, in the situation with the potential to fall, there really isn't much of a risk, then that isn't a challenge, is it? Think about it. Use it if you want. And thanks for stopping by.
Well, hello, and welcome to Bill Allen World. I am Wizzy, the Wizard. I'm back once again to remind you to subscribe and click on the notifications button, and also watch videos that are over there. Tune in to the next episode of whatever show you were just watching, and watch other shows featuring Bill. He made me say that, because he's a narcissist. Okay, bye.